I'm Jordan Hatfield, and this is Faster Film Critic. Today on the show, we discuss Gladiator II with Kolter and Chase Fugel. Gladiator II is a 2024 action epic directed by Ridley Scott, who is currently claiming this is the greatest film he's ever made. However, there is a xenomorph, a replicant, 2 female outlaws, a stranded astronaut, a cannibal, an Italian fashion designer, the crew from Black Hawk Super 6-1, and a legendary Roman general turned slave who may all just disagree. Gladiator II stars Connie Nielsen, Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, and Denzel Washington. Get in! We're going cinephiling. Kolter, Chase, how you guys doing?
I'm excited to talk about this movie.
Not as much strength, nowhere near as much honor. I was bored.
Dang, they should have had used that bald entertainer in the movie,
Right?
I don't know if I would have been quite as flamboyantly entertaining, but I'll take it.
I think you could do it.
You may surprise yourself. Ridley Scott's saying this is the best movie he's ever made.
Well, he's wrong.
Yeah, that is, I would agree right out of the gate. Let's just cut the drama. Not the best movie he's ever made. Did that affect your expectations going into this film?
Yeah, we mentioned this before. He's not exactly been knocking it out of the park lately. So, and the first trailer for this movie was hot trash. The second one was a little better. There was some positive buzz, but you never can really trust that stuff early on. And so I didn't have high expectations going into this, to be honest. How about you guys?
I don't remember the first and second trailer very well. I just remember the trailer I saw. I was actually pretty excited.
All right.
I got excited for the film, guys. I did. I got excited. I knew it wasn't going to be his best film, but I, hook, line, and sinker, bought into the hype.
Yeah.
I was excited to see this movie, and I'm going to be honest, I don't think it disappointed.
You know, I actually was not disappointed with this at all. I went in with pretty decent expectations, okay? And I was glad with what I got. I was really satisfied, actually. I think there are some things that Gladiator 1 kind of missed out on, and he kind of took the chance to tell the story a little bit differently in ways that maybe weren't thought of before. And I think he kind of leaned into the character dynamics and stuff a lot more than the previous film. It was more battle, gruesome, honor, power, good versus evil.
Yeah.
This time a little bit more dialogue and characters.
Yeah, that's true. I can see that point. I was bored out of my mind for most of this movie.
Really?
Yeah, Paul Mescal, he's no Russell Crowe. He didn't do bad.
Okay, yeah.
You know,
I can agree with you on that.
I mean, I know why they didn't cast the same actor who played Lucius in the first movie. He doesn't really have that look, but that kind of does something with the continuity. I think that just, we're told that he's this leader throughout the movie, but we never really see it. So he doesn't have that same kind of charisma and that he doesn't really exude that kind of leadership thing that Maximus did in the first one. And it was kind of bloated, I thought, too many characters. And I mean, Denzel's good. I think he's probably the most entertaining character in this, but he's good in everything. That and the monkey Dondas. They could have just had a movie with Denzel and Dondas, and I'd have been fine with that. But
Denzel Washington elevates every movie he's in.
He does. Yeah, for sure.
Almost sadly, because every actor around him just doesn't even compare. He's in a complete different level than them.
Yeah.
Top tier actor
agreed.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. These two goofy ass clowns as the emperors just drove me nuts for the entire movie.
They were pretty crazy. You didn't like the performances, though. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, the actors were fine. Joseph Quinn's always good. Everything I've seen him in is good. And it doesn't need to be historically accurate. There have never been twin emperors. That's okay if you're telling a good story, but some of the stuff, like, whoa, we got sharks in it. Whoa, rhinos. Whoa.
Yeah.
Dumb.
Yeah, it was pretty over the top with
the sharks. Interesting, Kolter, because I actually really liked the Emperors.
I like them too.
They were comedic in some ways. They were
that's true.
Definitely on the silly side, but they were two of the strongest points of the movie, in my opinion. Completely respect that you didn't like them, and I can understand why you didn't like them, but I just find it's funny that they did work for me. However, the shark scene didn't. As soon as there were the sharks in the water, I was like, oh my goodness, guys, come on. In fact, I was so turned off by it that when I left the movie, I Googled, could they even fill the Colosseum with water?
Yeah, they could.
I was shocked to discover they could fill the Colosseum with water and reenact kind of boat scenes. I didn't know that.
Insane.
I highly, highly, highly doubt there was ever sharks in the water.
No.
And that whole addition was nothing but a subtraction from the film, in my opinion. But the water in the Colosseum, okay, they did it. Okay, let's put it in the movie then. I'm not going to push back too hard on that, but
Yeah.
Well, it would have been cool to see the Colosseum as a little bit more of a character. I realize it's not a movie about architecture and things like that, but it is pretty fascinating that they were able to do that and did do that. But yeah, can you imagine sending out slaves in wagons? We're going to need, 50 sharks and, fill up, come on.
While we're on the topic of wild animals, the monkey thing was kind of lame too, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Really?
The fact that there were vicious monkeys fighting was great. I was okay with that.
Yeah.
But as soon as the one attacks Lucius and allows Lucius to bite his arm and he's just screams and that's not the way a wild monkey would act.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
No,
That's
no.
fair.
I was like, guys, come on here.
Yeah, there's that stupid look on his face when he yells at him. "Rah!" Monkey's like, "Oh no, come
yeah, he
on,
gets on all
come on."
fours.
Gets scared.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
really.
I was like,
no. Yeah,
It's almost like Lucius grabs the monkey's arm and you can see the monkey's in his eyes, he's communicating with his facial expressions. Please don't bite me. Please don't bite me. Please don't bite me. And then he gets bit and he's like, oh, he bit me. And he kind of runs off come on.
Yeah.
You know what though? I would not change the monkey part. I was afraid that this film was going to be too much like the first one, and that he was going to go out into this battle and then fight these warriors and then win and whatever. But I saw the monkeys come out. I was like, okay, a little different, getting a little creative with the Colosseum fighting. I like that. I mean, the sharks pushed it.
The only thing that would have made the shark scene better is if there were also tornadoes with sharks in them that were spiraling through the Colosseum. I would have been in for that.
Yeah, that would have been good.
I got a question about this movie as it relates to the first movie. It wasn't clear to me that Lucius was ever Maximus's son. Was that ever really explicitly was it implied in the first one? Did I miss something?
I think it was implied, but never explicitly said.
Very lightly hinted at. I wouldn't say implied.
Okay.
I would say very, very lightly hinted at.
All right.
But it definitely wasn't confirmed. This movie confirmed that, which, by the way, was a writing aspect I did not appreciate.
Yeah, it didn't work for me either. And my wife, Myra, she brought up another point. At the conclusion of the first movie, Maximus, his whole goal was to bring forth Marcus Aurelius's wish to give Rome back to the Senate, power back to the people. So why did Lucius even need to? Why was he in danger? Why? I understand because movie, that's why. But why was he made to be sent off? What was the danger in him being killed? That also was what? Why? Then it was never really explained. And what happened after that movie? It was just kind of glazed over. And I don't know, man.
Yeah, it kind of was.
Had some big problems.
Yeah, it was quick. I understood it to be Marcus Aurelius wanted to turn the empire back over to the Senate and to the people, but he was killed and he was unable to do that. Then Commodus became the emperor and he ruled in selfishness, but then he was also killed. And so Lucius was the next heir to the throne.
Okay.
And because he was so young, he couldn't serve in that position yet, which made him a target. So no one was directly threatening him at that point. But Lucilia, Lucius's mother, was savvy enough to understand my son has now got a giant target on his back, and I am unable to protect him, so I'm going to send him away for his safety. That was my understanding.
Okay.
But I do have another problem with that, and that is Maximus had a 12-year-old son with his wife. Because if you remember, Lucilia was like, meet Lucius, my son. And Maximus was like, I have a son who's also 12. And in the first film, they paint Maximus as having such a love and loyalty to his wife.
Yes.
They treat him as though he is a man of nothing but integrity and honor.
Yes.
And yet now we know that Maximus had an affair with Lucilia in order to have Lucius.
Yeah.
I just felt like that detracted from his character.
Yeah, man. That's why I had to ask the question, because I don't think it was implied. I mean, it was implied, but it wasn't clear enough to me. And because of that scene where she's trying to she's coming on to him a little bit, and he's taking a step back, and he's putting these boundaries between him and her. And I thought, well, yeah, he is a man of honor. He is a man of integrity. So that didn't work. It just didn't.
Huge character inconsistency.
That's how I read into it. This is a character inconsistency. And I can hear someone saying, man, he's away from his wife for years and years. And
All that testosterone built up in the cell.
Yeah, he's a general.
Right.
I don't buy any of it.
Yeah.
In the film, he was portrayed as a man of true honor and in true integrity, and it just, you're right.
Yeah.
It just it didn't work for me either.
Even that one scene he shares with Lucius through the cage that he's trapped in. Nothing about that.
I love that
in the first
scene.
movie, yeah. But nothing about that interaction implies that he is even potentially his father. I think he's just kind of, he knows this family. He's connected to this family in some way. And there's a familial connection, but not one of, it's not paternal. It's just, there's never any like look in his face that implies he's forlorn about it or he's kind of regretful. I mean, it's.
Well, it was apparent that Maximus never knew Lucius was his son. I think that was kept secret. But there were two other issues that really didn't work for me. Number one, I feel like Pedro Pascal was miscast.
Yeah, totally.
Really?
Dude.
Yeah.
He's just playing Pedro Pascal in this.
Yeah, I didn't love him in this role, number one. And number two, I absolutely didn't like his character. Right out of the gate, the ships are coming into this city, and Pedro Pascal's the general on these ships as he's coming in to attack this city. And really cool scene. I love the camera work. I love the way the camera drops down between the two ships, and you see above the water. I thought visually this scene was stunning. But as the ships roll up, the drawbridge gets stuck. And he's the general in the back of the ship, and he sees this. And immediately he's like, I'm going to put myself on the front line, like put myself in the most dangerous position. And not only am I going to do that, but I'm going to take my helmet off. Yeah. And I'm just going to show the crowd, right? Show the audience how brave I really am. And he goes marching up there, unnecessarily throws his helmet off, drops the drawbridge, and then just starts killing guys. And there's just no complexity to his character. He is selfless and he is noble throughout. No complexity. Yep. Didn't work for me. So not only did I not like the casting of Pedro Pascal.
You think no complexity?
Very little.
Really?
Yeah, I felt like there was very little complexity. You always know he was going to take the high road. You always knew.
But what about when he went behind everybody's backs and was trying to lie and keep it a secret that he was going to have the army come in and kill?
But what he was trying to do was dethrone these...
It was for the better.
Yeah, I mean, but he's basically doing the same thing that Maximus did in the first film, right? Which is try to stage this
coup
secret invasion to try and overthrow the government and give the power back to the people, which is a noble cause, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So...
I don't know.
No complexity. He was always a man of morals. Even in the fight, he's like, I'm not gonna, at the end in the Colosseum when he's fighting Lucius, he's like, I know who you are. I'm willing to give my life for you. No complexity. I don't like that kind of simplicity in a character.
Yeah. Yeah, setup was not great for that. I think the only reason why they had that scene in the beginning of the movie is to justify his army's loyalty to him later when he's like, well, I've got 5,000 people that are going to come, okay. Right. That was probably the only reason why they showed that.
So what was it that made Pedro Pascal's character, his nobility, not so convincing, but Maximus's in the first one?
That is an excellent question, and I don't know how to answer that. When we did our podcast on Gladiator I, I said the same thing. I said, Maximus is a very simple, one-dimensional character, and that typically doesn't work for me. But for some reason, somehow, Ridley Scott and Russell Crowe were able to pull it off, and I loved it there. I loved Maximus there.
Yeah.
But it typically doesn't work for me, and it didn't work for me here.
Yeah, it boils down to development. We spent some time with Maximus on the front lines. You saw him interact with his troops. True. You saw how he spoke. There was none of that with Pedro Pascal's character. He was just guy on boat in charge, and then that first moment of reflection is when they're burning this field of bodies, and he's got what looks to be a look of regret on his face, which is really the only insight that you have in his character, that he's one, he's either sick and tired of fighting wars, or two, he's that plus somewhat in contention with Rome's plight to conquer. So again, it has nothing to do, I think it's development. It's just the writing wasn't particularly strong. I don't think his performance was particularly strong. Same thing with Connie Nielsen in this, man. They were sleepwalking through this movie. They phoned their performances in.
Yeah, I agree with you on Connie.
Connie Nielsen felt like she was there for emotional support.
Emotional support. I don't know if it was all the Botox in her face that prohibited her from emoting, but there was just nothing between I'm happy, I'm sad. I just didn't. I felt nothing when she was on screen, and none of that stuff worked.
In the first Gladiator, I was really hoping for a great character arc from Maximus. And there's not a really dramatic arc there.
No.
Like you were saying, he's a one-dimensional character in the first one. And so I really liked that there was a little bit more of that, the anger and denial and coming to terms with Lucius. I just found it a lot easier to connect to this character.
Let's talk about Paul Mescal a little bit.
Okay.
Kolter, you mentioned that you didn't like his casting.
He's not bad. As an audience, we're being told by other characters in the movie how full of rage he is. And I never saw it. He bit a monkey, screamed at a monkey in a fight. I never saw this rageful side of him. I didn't see. He's not one note, but there's not a whole lot to him, and he doesn't. He just doesn't have that charisma. He doesn't have that weight that Russell Crowe. He doesn't have that kind of reflective silence that Russell Crowe did so well in that movie. And he wasn't horrible. He just wasn't very compelling.
So this was the other aspect of the film that didn't work for me. However, it wasn't Paul Mescal's casting that bugged me. I actually really liked him in this role, but it was all of the writing around him that I didn't like. That was the problem for me. To dig a little deeper on that point, what didn't work was they were trying to recreate Maximus in Lucius. For example, his wife was killed very early on. Then he becomes a gladiator. Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, he picks up sand and rubs it before every fight, just like Maximus, right?
Yes.
Then he becomes the leader of the slaves. They were literally taking Maximus and trying to recreate him in Lucius, as opposed to making Lucius his own person.
Right.
And that didn't work.
In a way, I can agree with you, but like when Lucilia tries to come talk to him the first time, and he just tells her off completely.
Right.
With such anger.
Such anger.
Yeah.
I liked that. That was so much different than Maximus.
Agreed. But why did, when the second time she came...
Yeah, 5 minutes later.
He accepted her.
Yep.
There was...
there wasn't enough time in between there.
Yeah.
Or events. Like, nothing happened. Like, it was just a second appearance, and he's like, Mom, I love you.
Hey, he had his dream where he crossed the river.
That's a point.
Come on.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. But it didn't hit as hard as it needed to, I think, for that transition. But that is a fair point.
I agree. There was a huge turnaround.
Okay. Chase 1, Jordan 0.
How do you guys feel about the way that this movie ended?
It's no secret that the film's going to come to a point. It's going to be a battle between bad and good. Denzel Washington's amazing performance, Paul Mescal's amazing performance, they're going to battle it out, right?
Right.
Going in, I was expecting to not be surprised, but I liked the way that it got to that point. I wasn't expecting it to be Denzel Washington's character that he was going to battle at the end. I wasn't expecting all the power dynamics between the two emperors and Denzel Washington and the way that was going to all play out.
Yeah.
And I liked that. It made it a lot more unpredictable.
I liked Denzel Washington throughout this whole film. I liked his character. I liked the way he was trying to manipulate the emperors and gain power for himself. And I liked his backstory, although that is just barely hinted upon. There's not a lot of detail there.
Yeah.
I've made very clear the points of this film that I did not like, but there is a lot here to like. I did enjoy my experience watching this film. A lot of action, just like everything Ridley Scott does, the film is beautiful.
Sure.
Loved Denzel Washington, loved the emperors, loved the battle sequences, loved the cinematography. So there's a lot here to like. I know, Kolter, you've been a little bit vocal that you got bored in the film.
Yeah.
That wasn't my experience. I didn't get bored. I enjoyed the film. I think it's a film absolutely worth seeing. I do think that it was an unnecessary film. I thought Gladiator was masterful. I don't like the direction they went with Gladiator 2.
Yep.
The problems that I have are the writing. And by the way, Napoleon, I know that we all have very similar perspectives on Napoleon, the movie Napoleon. Right. The writer's the same.
Oh, well.
David Scarpa is the writer for Napoleon and one of the writers for Gladiator 2. And so I think a lot of the same weaknesses in Napoleon, of course, are going to come with the author into this film. And I just think that was the weakness in the film for me.
There were so many powerful moments in terms of writing in the first Gladiator, so many great reveals and plot beats and things that were really, really impactful, and none of that really was present in this. You'd mentioned about Denzel Washington's character, his reveal of being branded under Lucilia's father, and it just didn't smack the way it needed to. It just didn't, it was too late in the story, I feel. And same thing with Lucius thing. And everybody around Lucius, all the gladiators in the first Gladiator had some character to them. You got to know the folks that he was kind of fighting in this arena with, which made Maximus's impact more believable and more effective. Whereas they're all just kind of there. They're all background folks, and it just doesn't.
That's what's missing from this film is the emotional weight. Case in point, when Maximus becomes a slave and he rises to kind of become the leader of the slaves, you believe it. Like, you see that in him, and you see the slaves slowly start to gain respect for him and trust him. And so by the time he is leading the slaves, you're like, yes. Like, you're emotionally engaged and believe it. In this film, Lucius becomes the leader, and you're like, wait, why? Like, what did he do to gain anyone's respect? Yeah. Like, I didn't see any of that. Yeah. I have no idea how he rose to that position amongst these slaves. Okay, he's a general, and he's led an army before. Okay, I get it. But these are slaves.
I think I found it a little bit more convincing than you guys.
Okay.
I liked his humbleness, how he grew up in royalty, so he was very well spoken, but he chose not to speak a lot.
Okay.
So when he would speak, it was very impactful. Even though it wasn't a lot, it was still very impactful to the other slaves, or throughout the movie, the medic, the doctor. I loved that relationship between them.
Yeah,
how that
great.
built.
Yep. Yeah.
There was the scene where they're rowing the boat. That's where he got a lot of the respect from the slaves around him.
When the slave driver, you're talking about the fake boat on the sand,
right,
yeah.
And the slave driver kicks all the other slaves off and makes him row by himself.
Yeah. Although it's really dramatic. It's really dramatic.
I don't mind a little drama.
That's dramatic.
Yeah.
It also comes at the wrong time, right? There was a few battles before that scene where Lucius is in the arena and he's barking orders to everybody around him. And it's like, why would anybody listen to him? Like, they're like immediately going for that whole Maximus. Like, it doesn't work.
However, this was the excuse I made for Napoleon, and I'm going to make the same excuse here. There was a 4-hour cut of Napoleon.
Right.
And I can't help but wonder if I could see that whole cut, if a lot of these writing problems would be fixed.
Sure.
There is a 4-hour cut of Gladiator II.
Yeah. Okay.
Ridley Scott is saying that it may make light of day sometime. I would love to see that cut, and maybe that cut will resolve a lot of these issues. Maybe we'll see something between Lucius and Lucilia, his mother, that becomes more impactful in terms of mending their relationship. Maybe we'll see more footage of him earning the respect of the slaves. Maybe. Yeah. I really hope. I would love to see that cut of the film. I would love to love this movie. Yeah. But as it sits now in theaters, it did have some problems. Yeah, I'm not going to lie about that.
I didn't have a hard time investing myself in this film with the characters. It was almost easier than the first film for me.
Wow,
which is, it's hard to admit.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, it sounds like you like this one more than, or you're maybe at least more entertained by this one than you were the other one, the first one.
I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but
that's all right.
Yeah, I could really connect to the characters a lot more in this one.
Okay.
I don't know that a lot of people are going to disagree with you, Chase. I think more people will disagree with Kolter and I.
Really?
So on Rotten Tomatoes, this film is currently sitting at 84% amongst audiences. I think most people are going to like this film. And I think most people will say that Kolter and I are being too nitpicky on some of these minor details. But I expect more out of Ridley Scott. I've seen his filmography. He has a history of being a fantastic filmmaker.
Yeah.
His last couple swings haven't been great. Although I really did like House of Gucci. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I like that film more than most people. I thought that was a great film. But I just expect more out of him than what we got here in terms of writing.
Yeah.
Everything else about the film is amazing. The writing is my issue.
Yeah, same.
So I think most people are going to agree with you, Chase. I think we're going to be the party poopers.
I'm okay with pooping.
I was also pretty worried about them just using the battle scenes to try to maintain people's attention.
Yeah,
just
for sure.
Choreography, blood, guts. But I felt like every scene in the Colosseum leading up to the climax, there was something told there, or there was creative combat. Like when he took the crossbow and aimed it up to all the royalty and tried to shoot somebody.
Yeah.
I just felt like there was a lot more there than just blood, guts, fighting, adrenaline.
There was blood, guts, and fighting in this, man. This film was violent and graphic.
Yeah. And even more. And even more. You got to learn a little bit more about people, characters, relationships. What did you guys think about the very end, the final fight?
You mean between Lucius and Macrinus?
Yeah.
I really liked it. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
He gets his arm chopped off, and then it's split open, and he falls in the water, and his guts start leaking out. It was gruesome, but I thought it was cool. I thought it worked.
Yeah, it worked.
It was pretty dramatic.
That part wasn't horrible. It was this visual of these two, as I'm understanding, they're two armies on the same side, right? They're both Romans. He kills Denzel Washington's character, and then he gives this speech it's like this 15-second speech, and both sides are like, oh, Rome and stuff. And it just didn't quite, it wasn't very fulfilling. It just kind of felt like that Ridley Scott didn't know what to do to kind of wrap this all up and give Lucius an ending that was different than Maximus's ending, in which Maximus dies, obviously. Killing Lucius would have been, I think, another point of complaint. Like, this is absolutely a remake of the first Gladiator. So,
I could see that, yeah. If the character didn't work for you throughout the rest of the film, that scene's going to have little to no weight.
Yeah.
I expected the speech coming from Lucius.
Sure.
But it all worked. All of that I didn't have a problem with.
Yeah.
I was fine with the ending.
It worked for me.
I don't know. Maximus was a general. So as a general, he had connections to his troops, which is why that kind of worked so well in the first movie. But Lucius doesn't. Like, they don't really know who this guy is. Like, imagine half these people didn't even know he was alive, and they, I don't know, felt unearned.
One more thing I'd like to ask you guys about is the very opening.
Yeah.
I've kind of got a strong idea about this.
Okay.
Where it opens with the big gruesome battle. I really didn't like it. And I was really afraid for what was going to come after.
Okay.
And I really dislike when movies start out with big battles like that.
Huh. Okay.
With big gruesome fights. You have kind of a feel of bad versus evil, who the protagonist is, if you've seen the trailer. But there's no emotional connection. You're just really watching blood, guts, people getting smashed. And then this film, it almost tries to set up a revenge film by having his wife murdered.
Right.
But it just doesn't have any weight. Even my grandpa, who was sitting next to me while we were watching the film, an arrow goes through her chest, and he says, I thought that was supposed to be armor. And he kind of laughed. And I'm like, yeah, there's just no weight to it.
Yeah. As a set piece, I thought it was one of the more interesting of the movies. At least it wasn't this kind of, they didn't repeat the same kind of land-based battle where they're fighting across some open, deforested area. It was kind of this naval thing. So a little bit different there, at least. But you're absolutely right about it and not having any impact. I mean, it just, not just that, but like you're repeating the same beats from the first movie. A lot of things about this movie that just piss me off. Like, they make it a point to bring out these spiked gloves and drop them on the ground, and they start beating the hell out of each other with them. Not a scratch on the face. Come on.
Yeah.
There's spikes on the
they're
gloves.
Punching each other in the face, but there's like no blood in.
Details matter.
It reminded me a little bit of the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight.
I don't know, though. I think this was choreographed a little bit better than the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight.
That's a good way to put it. The more I talk about this movie, the more I don't like it.
Oh, let's quit talking about it then.
That's funny.
No,
this film was so much better than the sequel that was originally written.
No.
Oh, no.
So listen to this. I'm reading this on IMDb. In the years following the release of the first film, there were numerous attempts to write a sequel. Musician Nick Cave was invited to draft a version by Russell Crowe and Sir Ridley Scott. His version focused on more mythical elements of ancient Rome and would have seen Maximus arrive in the afterlife only to be faced with other souls who are yet to ascend further. He is eventually tasked by Jupiter and other Roman deities to return to Earth and find and kill Hepatitis. I don't know how to pronounce that name.
Hepatitis.
A former deity who has betrayed them. From there, he is resurrected as a Christian and finds himself journeying back to Rome on a mission to stop Christianity from spreading while crossing paths with the new emperor, Lucius.
Is that real?
The movie would have ended with Maximus being cursed to live for an eternity, featuring a montage of soldiers battling through the Crusades, World War II, and then Vietnam War, eventually revealing a modern-day Maximus working at the Pentagon in Washington.
Oh, hell no. No.
I am so glad we got this version of Gladiator 2 and not that version of Gladiator 2, because as much trash as we've been talking on the writing of Gladiator 2, it is leaps and bounds better than that version.
Yeah.
And I would say leaps and bounds better than Napoleon. I don't know if you guys are going to disagree with me, but
yeah.
You know,
I would agree with that.
Let's go ahead and rate this film 1 out of 5.
2. It's a 2. I'll tell you why it's a 2. It was competently made. All Ridley Scott movies are. I was bored. It's bloated. I didn't care about most of the characters. Nobody needed this movie. Nobody asked for this movie. I'm done.
I really enjoyed this film. I'm feeling 4 on this. I thought the performances were strong.
Okay.
Denzel Washington was great. I think this Gladiator 2 does a lot better with subtlety than the first film, and that's what I love in movies. I love trying to see what's being said in between each word, not verbally. I can see your point of view, and the characters aren't convincing in the first place, but, you know, they worked for me, so I'm giving this movie a 4.
That sounds good.
I'm glad that you love this, Chase. I'm going to come right between the middle of you guys. I'm going to come in at a 3.
All right.
I felt there were some weaknesses in the film, but overall, I had a good time at the movie theater. I thought the film was worth viewing. I don't necessarily agree it was worth making, but now that it's made and it's here, I can enjoy it for what it is, and it did hold my attention. I enjoyed myself. There were parts of it that were great. 3 for me, worth checking out. Denzel Washington was fantastic in Gladiator 2. I personally am a huge Denzel fan. One film release that many people missed, starring Denzel Washington, was The Tragedy of Macbeth, directed by Joel Coen. This film is very Shakespeare. In fact, I couldn't understand most of what was being said, but I found the movie to be absolutely magnificent. In fact, it was one of my very favorite films of 2021. It is streaming on Apple, and if you have not seen The Tragedy of Macbeth, I highly recommend you check it out, and don't forget to let me know what you think. Thank you for listening to Faster Film Critic, and please join us next time when we discuss Malcolm Washington's directorial debut, The Piano Lesson. You can also follow us on Letterboxd, Cinetrack, and Instagram. Email us at fasterfilmcritic@gmail.com. Hit us up if you have any questions, comments, feedback, or review requests, and please share this episode with your movie-loving friends.